your go-to platform for making the law powerful and personal. I'm your host, Emmanuel Mangaila, and I'm honored to guide tonight's deeply important conversation. Our theme for tonight is redefining justice, reforming defilement and rape laws in Zambia. So, in a society where silence has often drowned out the cries of survivors and outdated legal frameworks have failed to deliver timely justice, we ask it is time to rewrite the laws to reflect the reality the victims face today. We'll explore how Zambia's current legal definitions of defilement and rape stand up against real world cases. Are the punishments just? Are the reporting procedures trauma sensitive? Are we protecting the vulnerable or perpetuating fear and stigma? Joining me on the show are two guests, two legal experts, and their activists and voices from the justice system who will help us unpack the gaps and possibilities within our legal structure. So, without further ado, let me introduce them. One is more prominent, he's featured mostly on the show, Lusekelo Kamfwa, and one is the vice president for the, you can just say it again.
President of the Lusaka Goldsmiths Law Association.
Pardon me, the president for the Lusaka Goldsmiths Law Association, yes. So, Lusekelo, you can just tell us maybe, most people know what you do, right? But maybe you can tell us what you like doing in your free time again. Maybe someone is just training for the first time and they don't know about you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, for me, I would say what I often do in my free time is um, I mainly, apart from like usual study and whatnot, I watch football. I do some what I call inquisitive reading, where I just find, okay, I don't really understand why certain animals behave like this. Let me just read. In my free time, I would usually maybe be on YouTube, watch interesting videos, stuff like that. So I'd say that would be the bulk in terms of what I do in my free time, apart from the main things that people know me about.
Okay, and also I like your activism on like major platforms such as Facebook. You are like you advocate for various issues. Can you like talk about some of the issues you try to advocate for?
Thank you very much. So as already stated, there are so many issues that I advocate for. One of the chief things that I'm still working in terms of advocacy is the aspect of matters to do with students' welfare, what students go through, and the need to reform our laws so that students across Zambia are well protected. I also advocate for recently this matter to do with child defilement, rape cases, and the likes. And aside from that, there was, of course, the current discussion on the cyber laws. So, for me, generally, anything that affects the livelihoods of people, that's something that I'm strongly advocating for.
Okay, so we can now jump on to the president of Lusaka. Hey, I mean,
You can say LGU law.
Yeah? LG?
LGU law.
LGU law.
Yes. I think my name is Simon Mwewa. Yes.
So can you talk more about LGU law? And what it is about?
Maybe perhaps my as he has elaborated, trying to know more about myself, maybe to somebody who is listening for the first time.
Yes.
Okay, so there isn't much about my life. I am I'm a law student, law faculty president for LGU Law Association, and I am an author. I've written a book titled Mr. President, Sir, which talks about the history of development post 1964. And that will take you through the journey from way back when we got our independence. It talks about the various national development plans. You'll find Tazara, you'll find economic liberalization, you'll find the development plans and the like. So I am an author, then I'm also a law student. Then I am also an advocate also in the fight against injustices, human rights violations, as well as I also think specifically even things like child abuse and rape as well. Yes,
okay.
I think that's all about me.
The most interesting part is you're an author. You know, I love reading, and I would love to read the book that you wrote. And maybe could you share the platform that someone could access the book from?
Okay, so you can access it with me for now, or authorship and Career Network, which is the publisher. But we'll soon be taking the books to Book World and the like, so that people have free access to the piece of literature, because it is something that would be of interest to political science scholars as well as just the citizenry. So that they will know where they're coming from, so that they know their future.
Yes. Wonderful. So let's get into the show now. Let's kickstart. So now, someone maybe wants to understand the current legal frameworks on the topic that we're currently discussing, which is reforming defilement and rape laws in Zambia. And the previous two discussions that we've had on the show have just been on this. So this is a pressing issue that we are really we really want to advocate for, right? So now, maybe I get straight into the question. The first question goes to Mr. Lusekelo. Can you simplify the definition of rape? Maybe someone out there wants to know what rape is. Of course, we know no, that one was raped. No, Zawanamchita raped. No, that one was. But what is rape?
Okay, so there's rape, the general definition, or that is there, and then there's a legal definition that is there in Zambia. So for the general definition, rape is simply having uh, sex with another person which is not consented to. All right. The thing that distinguishes regular sexual relations with rape is in rape there is no consent. Okay.
Okay.
So that is the general understood definition. But in Zambia, there's a technical phrasing of it in section 132 of the Penal Code, which says any canon knowledge of a woman or girl. And then if you look at the case authorities like R versus in Porocoso, that involves penetration. So to avoid being graphic, our law is very limited in terms of rape, as it only applies to boys, to girls and women, but not necessarily boys, which is in contrast to other jurisdictions like England, South Africa, and many other countries where rape applies to both men and women. Yes.
Don't you feel that we also need to adopt that notion of rape applying to both women and men?
Yes, I'm actually of the strong view that Zambia needs to do that, because one thing that we fail to appreciate is the number of cases of, for lack of better terms, rape that takes place on boys, all right? Because you find instances where maybe a man will target either a younger man or fellow man, force himself upon them. Now, because of that strict definition of penetration, and with us men, there's, without being too graphic, there's nothing to penetrate per se, that greatly limits it, without appreciating that no, there are so many instances where boys have been abused, but because of this limitation of the law, they can't really, that can't be really recognized as a rape. So I think there's that need of legal reformation and connection with the law so that it's adequately resolved that way.
You know, when you say the part for without being too graphic, someone is already graphic out there. Okay, it comes to you, Mr. Simon. How would you simplify defilement?
Okay, first one is to section 138 of the Penal Code, couple 87. 87 or 88? 87?
87.
87, eh? Yeah,
Yes.
for the laws of Zambia. So it will tell us that that is having, it is the unlawful, or it is having canon knowledge of a girl under the age of 18. Yeah, so it doesn't matter whether there is consent or not, as long as the person is under 18, meaning they are not of that age where they can consent to such a thing. So in layman's language, I think that's the simplest definition that we can give.
Without consent, or
Without consent,
or with or without consent.
Whether there is consent or there was consent, as long as somebody is not of that age, which the law prescribes that consent can apply.
I actually saw a funny post somewhere of a teacher. Now she's female, but she was impregnated by like one of our pupils in grade 9, and it was a guy and a female teacher. And I don't know how the law was, like what the current what's going on right now, but yeah, we need to stop that. So we can now go on, like we can jump on to another question, which says, can you briefly explain what the current Zambian laws say about defilement and rape? Like, what are the current laws on defilement and rape?
Okay, so on rape, just as my learned colleague Lusekelo Kamfwa mentioned earlier, when we look at sections 132 of the Penal Code, Chapter 87, it defines rape as having canon knowledge of a person, well, 18 years and above, without their consent, or maybe through consent, which is forced, or it can be maybe taking advantage or pecuniary advantage, or maybe you're masquerading as somebody who is their husband in the process of you trying to have that thing. So to me, I feel that I choose to subscribe that that definition is okay. And yes, that's what it talks about. When it comes to defilement, when you look at sections 138 of Couple 87, it also brings in the aspect of defilement and defines it as having canon knowledge of somebody that is below the age of 18. Yeah, with or without their consent. So it's illegal because the law looks at it as something that is not. It looks at the person as somebody who is not really qualified of age to make a decision concerning that. Yeah, so that's what the laws talk about in the country.
Okay, and to you, Lusekelo, like how are they differentiated, these symbols? How do you think they're differentiated?
Yes. So before I even go into looking at the differentiation, I think it's necessary to also look at a brief history in relation to the sexual offenses. So 2005 is a landmark year when it comes to legal reformation in relation to sexual offenses. So before 2005, when it came to the offense of defilement, defilement was only defined as taking place to a girl or woman. Yes. So it was only strictly related to females. So now in 2005, there's a realization that no, it's not only females that are being abused, it's also males that face defilement cases. And also what was prevalent in that time was where you'd have a situation, especially with the AIDS pandemic, where you'd find that certain witch doctors would say, no, if you want to be cured of HIV, sleep with this girl or whatever. So those things were taking place, and many activists were saying that there was much need for legal reformation to tackle those things. So in 2005, we have the amendments to the Penal Code, which, though they did not change the definition of rape, did extend what amounted to defilement to now including boys in defilement cases, and also including a provision in subsection 3 that relates to any person who encourages that in order to cure a certain disease, they must sleep with a girl or boy, that they would be liable to a minimum of 15 years or life imprisonment. So that's my simple gist. And then also in terms of difference, rape, it applies to anyone who is above the age of consent, which according to section 132 is 16, right?
Yes.
So anyone who is above the age of consent, you say they are raped, right? And then also there's the aspect of consent which is required. So if so the way rape is, if you did not consent, then it amounts to rape. With defilement, there's no need to know whether that person was consented or not, and there's a good reason why. Below the age of 16, a child at that age does not really appreciate the nature of sexual relations themselves. They don't appreciate what exactly is happening. And the law also takes into cognizance that during that particular age, a child can be easily manipulated. So even if they say yes or they consent, it's not really genuine because they're in their formative years. So those are the two fundamental differences between rape and defilement.
Okay, wonderfully explained. So if you're just joining us, this is the Law Focus radio show right here on 91.7 FM. Our theme this evening is redefining justice, reforming defilement and rape laws in Zambia. And in the studio, I'm joined by Lusekelo Kamfwa and Mr. Simon Mwewa. So we continue with the discussion. Mr. Simon, what is the age of consent under Zambian law and how does it impact defilement? I think on the age, we've already discussed that, right?
Exactly.
Maybe you can just reiterate for someone who's just joining. You can just reiterate.
Who's just joined.
Yes.
So age for defilement and rape?
Yes, in Zambia.
Okay, so the age of consent when it comes to rape in the country pursuant to the Penal Code, Cap 88, Cap 87 rather, of the laws of Zambia is that somebody has to be 18. And if they are 18 and above, then it's either they can say yes or no to the proposal. But somebody who is below that age, let's say a girl who is 16, 14, 15, no matter, even if you're in a relationship with somebody that is 25, as long as you are below the age of consent, that becomes defilement. So anybody that does that is liable to punishment by the law. Exactly.
Yeah. And how does it impact defilement charges? Yeah, we haven't really tackled on that issue.
Okay, so impact with regards to what? How exactly can you explain it?
Like the defilement charges, that maybe a charge comes up, like how does it impact it?
Okay, so for instance, if somebody has been found wanting, or this week we refer to them as an accused person, then they are taken to court for defilement. Then they'll analyze the issue, look at the elements that have to coexist for the charge of defilement to be satisfied. So when they look at those things and they discover that all of the things have been met, then they are definitely going to prison. Yes, exactly. I think that's my understanding of the impact.
Okay, wonderful. So, Mr. Lusekelo, there are any challenges with how defilement or rape is defined in law?
Thank you for that question. One thing that learned author Simon Kusika notes in his book on criminal law in Zambia is that one challenge about our law is that in as much as it says that such and such amounts to defilement, there isn't really a clear definition of what amounts to defilement, a clear definition. But all that is stated, like in terms of the description of that provision, is an unlawful carnal knowledge of any girl or boy. But here's also where the thing comes in. Remember, in our law, carnal knowledge isn't really defined. When we're talking of carnal knowledge, for the those who don't understand the law, we're talking of sexual relations, like coming from, in Genesis when it says Adam knew his wife and then they conceived. Yes. So understand no in that sense. So what we have is based on case authority like R versus Emporocoso, which defines penetration as relating to a woman, right? So now here's the tricky thing when it comes especially to the boy child. And I was talking with a colleague who works in the police profession.
Okay.
It's easy, like for a girl, right? If they've been defiled by a man, it's easy to tell upon investigation that something happened, because typically most of the girls that are involved in this are usually virgin. So it's very easy to tell that, okay, something happened, right? It's easy to ascertain. Yeah. But with a boy, you have a major challenge, because what you need to do is to check whether penetration took place. Now here's the dynamic, and there have been cases where older women have defiled boys. So now here's the dilemma. With a girl, the girl is the victim, and as a victim, what is she able to do? She's able to go to the clinic and have it tested, right? Who is the victim here? The boy. And who's been penetrated? The girl. I mean the woman. Who's the defiler? So do you expect that a woman who is even the one who caused this boy to do the actions would be willing to say, no, do a test on me? No.
Definitely refuse.
Yes. So that's why, even in terms of our definition, it also limits the police force in terms of what would amount to defilement. So if we had a more broadened definition, as especially relating to the boy child, because boy children do go through this as well. It's just not reported as much because of the shame that comes with in our society. If there was a more broadened definition, like the way the Sexual Offences Act in England is, where you have a broadened definition of penetration to say that, okay, it's not only this or that, or like other statutes where you don't even just limit it to penetration itself, but anything that is of a sexual nature, that would do more justice, not only for girls but also for boys as well. Yes.
So definitely that law needs to change.
Yes.
Right? Yes, it needs to cater for both women and men, both boys and girls, right?
Yeah.
Not just favoring one gender. Coming to you, Mr. Simon, how effective has the current legislation been in protecting victims of defilement and rape?
Well, when we look at the current pieces of laws or legislation in the country at the moment, they've prescribed punishments, and they have made it illegal for such an act to be done to the relevant or prescribed ages in the law. But previously, we've been recording so many cases throughout.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it was a party that was happening or whatsoever that was happening in the minds of men. What has been happening to them?
It's actually currently happening. It hasn't ended. No wonder we continue on discussing.
I saw that I don't know whether 300 and something cases which were not even reported to the public by the police. So I feel that whereas my colleague Mr. Kamfwa has mentioned that there's really an urgent need to come and look into this law, so that we also cater for those people that have not been considered in it. Now, because we have tried to come up with these laws to ensure that we try and deter people from offending further, but there's no progress, because these things are still happening up to now. So meaning our people are not safe, and even the victims themselves, after the particular act has happened, it's just about taking somebody to prison. But there is no any legislation that brings in the aspect of trying to be there for them, to help them cater for their various needs as well. You know, somebody needs to go through psychological counseling. Somebody also needs to be helped in the case that actually the person that was doing that to them was the one that was helping them. So I think the current pieces of legislation just look into protecting people after they have been their rights have been violated, but it doesn't look into protecting them actually after.
Exactly, like PTSD, post-traumatic.
There's nothing like that, which is something that needs to be looked into urgently.
And
yes.
the problem is, I think it's a whole trend in most African countries because they don't really take the trauma after. Countries like, when you go to countries like the US or the UK, they take this seriously, really seriously.
Very serious.
But here, on the other hand, they'll just say, no, we need to work on. Sometimes even the victim will even go scot-free. They'll be like, no, if you report, especially fathers, you might find the father is defiling their own child. But because they are like the breadwinner of the family, you don't have to report them.
Yeah, it's just a family issue. You discuss it, you keep quiet. And it was actually disappointing to also see those 3 women on social media who were saying, you can take the child to a government.
Really disappointing.
Just give us our husband back. Shame.
And even it goes as far as the church. The church also protects these like defilers, and you know, sometimes they may be even the oldest, like the elders in the church. They would be defiling these young girls and boys, and nothing goes on because they are scared that the church will be in disrepute and people will stop going to church.
That's a fact. It's happening.
It's happening.
Yes.
So if you're just joining us, this is a Low Focus radio show, and you can tune into our socials. On Facebook, you can like us. We're the Low Focus radio show on the radio, and on Instagram, we're the Low Focus radio show on the radio, 91.7 FM, and on TikTok, you can also join us, and on LinkedIn, you can join us. We have the same handle. So tonight, we're discussing the topic of rape and defilement. We've continued. Actually, we've discussed this like 3 consecutive weeks because this is a pressing issue, and the narrative needs to change. Okay, we can go straight into a segment of gaps in the law that you've seen. So gaps in the law and the need for reform. So maybe, Lusekelo, you can just tell me what are some notable legal gaps in our current framework that you've observed.
Okay, so there are quite many as it relates to rape and defilement. So I'll just highlight a few in relation to defilement. First, I'll start on the rape side. So as I earlier mentioned, the rape only applies to women and girls without actually dealing with the male aspect.
The boy child.
Yes, and also the only provision which deals with that aspect of maybe the male side is the provisions we have in Zambia in relation to sodomy, which is in section 155, or commonly you hear these things, acts against the order of nature. Yes, so without being too graphic, where something goes where it isn't supposed to go. All right, so that's essentially what an act against the order of nature is. So now the way our current law is, when it came to aspect of section 155, it does provide about the aspects of against the order of nature. But one thing that it doesn't cater for, all right, is it doesn't cater for non-consensual acts against the order of nature, all right? It only relates to, let's say, a child. It provides for, okay, if a child is sodomized, that's why usually when a man abuses a boy, it would be usually under the case of sodomy, which is section 155. But it doesn't cater for unconsensual cases. Why is this important? Because the language used in section 155 is that anyone who permits another, right? Anyone who permits another to do things against the order of nature to them, right? And why that is problematic is in criminal law, one thing that to understand is being a party to an offense. So if you permit somebody to do something against the order of nature, you're participating in a crime, right?
Exactly.
So now, without the law taking into consideration men that are that are raped, even though our law doesn't recognize that, it creates a huge barrier in terms of adequate justice. That's why oftentimes cases related to that are reduced to indecent assault. And you know the way indecent assault is? Sodomy carries a sentence from either 15 years to life imprisonment. But indecent assault is anything between 50 to 20 years, which is lack of justice. And I think for me, one other two other things that I think would need to be highlighted in terms of defects of laws, and I think my colleague would also highlight as well. One is to do in Zambia lack of laws to do with concealment of defilement cases.
Exactly.
In jurisdictions like America and Australia and many other countries, not only is it an offense to commit rape or defilement, it's also an offense to hide such cases. When somebody has become aware or should be aware and they don't report that, they'll become liable and actually save some time in prison, right?
Yes.
If we had such laws, that incidence of those 3 women that were trying to bribe the officers wouldn't be even entertained.
Sure.
And also given especially that in especially rural areas, as noted in parliamentary reports done in 2022 related to GBV, which also looked at aspects of sexual abuse and whatnot.
Yeah.
Usually in the village, people, these cases either get swept under the rug or they'll start the case matter, but then withdraw it later. So if we had laws to do with concealment and then said if you conceal, whether it be at home, whether it be in church or whatever, if you know and you don't report, you also go to jail. At least that will reduce the cases. And finally, as one major highlight, which I was reading a report I just opened, it was a journal article in the International Journal for Crime, Justice and Social Democracy, authored by Penny Crofts from the University of Technology in Sydney, Australia. They're looking at the aspect of how the law needs to also criminalize to set penalties for institutions that do not do anything about sexual assault cases. Because one thing that they noted is, in as much as they are individual things, they noticed, like especially in Australia, there are institutional structures that have failed to take care of defilement and rape cases. So you find that at a school, at a church, sporting, whatever, you'll find that there'll be a lot of defilement cases, but there isn't any accountability mechanism for the institution itself and those that run it. So if our laws could also incorporate a provision which actually deals with offenses for institutions and heads of those institutions who don't do anything to handle matters, then I think we'd be going a good way as a nation. I'll leave it on to my colleague to report other things.
Yeah, and just before Mr. Simon come in, when it comes to our laws, right, they are so vague, and I feel that they don't rightly define some of these matters rightly, and there's need to amend, because if you look at countries like the US, right, they have rightly defined what rape is, but in Zambia, on the other hand, we are still tackling on the issue that it only applies to women. Only a woman can be raped, but a man can be raped. That needs to change. And also, there's that aspect of victims. In America, for example, a victim, even after 20 years, do you know they can report that, no, I was defiled, or I was maybe... But in Zambia, has there been any case like that?
They'll take it as it was consensual, or perhaps she was suffering from some psychological issues.
Exactly. Okay, so we can now come to our laws, like on the digital platforms. So, to you, Mr. Simon, do our laws adequately address digital forms of sexual exploitation? Like these days, the world is digital, right? And there's technology everywhere almost. There's now AI and everything like that. So, do you think our laws adequately address these issues?
Well, when we look at there are those instances where you try and you give somebody that is not of the lawful age to access things like pornography, or you make them watch such things. Yes, that is illegal if reported. But I think those are only things on paper at the moment. We can't say that they are enforced. Exactly. So I think there's also a need to also look into that.
Yeah.
In as much as we also are willing to come up with bills like cybersecurity and all those kinds of stuff, we should also put into consideration these issues of trying to protect the children from the cyberspace, so that they will be protected from all these digital sexual exploitations that might come their way. Yes.
And to you, Mr. Lusekelo Kamfwa, there are some people who have disabilities, or children who have disabilities, or physical disabilities. Maybe they are blind, or they can't see, or maybe they are lame or something like that. Is there enough legal protection for children with these physical disabilities? Do you think our laws have enough protection?
Okay. So seeing that we are speaking in the context of defilement and rape. Immediately after Section 138, we have Section 139, which actually addresses that, which I must say enforced rightly. The language used there is very archaic and also offensive in a way. So it talks of the defilement of idiots, which I
That's the correct term in English.
Idiots.
yes, but we live in a society, we live in a modern society, and these are persons that are very dear to us, and
Yeah.
there should be use of better language, or more like using like the way other statutes usually use those with mentally impaired, or like the way other statutes have been using, rather than using that phrase.
I think that term is like an old British term for such people. They were called idiots, and I don't think for now, you're right. For now,
Yeah.
it's too archaic, just like
Yeah.
you put it.
Yeah.
But to go to the substance, our current law does provide that it's, if I were to refer to it immediately, like I have it here, like in terms of summary, without, what it essentially provides is that anyone who has canon knowledge, which, remember, Adam knew his wife, that's what we're talking about. Yes, so anyone who has canon knowledge with of course it uses this phrase, an imbecile, um shall be liable upon conviction for a term not less than 14 years. For Let me read this. Yeah, for a term not less than not less than 14 years, and liable for life imprisonment. So also a good thing that this thing also provides is that the 2005 amendments removed a certain defense that was there, which was also an initial defense in relation to defilement. So these two defenses were that if a person at the time of having canon knowledge believed this person was older than 16, then there would be what's this. And then there's also the aspect of, if this person believed that this mentally impaired person was mentally sane, that they could go scot-free. So the 2005 amendments removed that. So essentially, if you have somebody canon knowledge with somebody who is mentally impaired, whether you knew that they were mentally impaired or not, you can be liable for either of those. So I feel in that aspect there is, on paper, the protection, but with all things in law, there's more to protect than simply just providing ABCD. There's the practical side of it as well.
True. So if you're just joining us, this is the Law Focus Radio Show on Unza Radio 91.7 FM, and we're almost wrapping up our show. Tonight we're discussing redefining the laws on defilement and rape. So we are discussing on like legal reforms that can improve regarding this topic. And our guests, just in case you're joining us, Lusekelo, Kamfwa, and Mr. Simon Mwewa. And Mr. Simon, I'll go straight to you. What do you think are some of the proposals for the legal reforms that can be put up?
Okay, so the proposals for the legal reforms
Yes.
with regards to this
The defilement and rape.
I'm looking for a term to describe it. We have been gassed
Yes.
countrywide with this.
I think it's even worse than that gassing issue. I just feel for the victims.
Yeah. The law is a tool for social change. And it is there to ensure that the society is protected. The society is a society which is one that is conducive for all, regardless. One Justice Benjamin Cardozo of the United States of America once said that the final cause of law must be for the betterment of society, if my colleague agrees with me, which is the actual thing. So when we look at our current pieces of legislation, we have tried to give punishments of prison sentences, and they have not been good enough to deter people from offending, because we've been receiving cases like every day on a daily basis. And those are not just things that there are quite a number which have not been reported.
Exactly.
And there are still more that are coming as long as we don't look at this thing, because the only thing that is needed here is to improve the punishment. And the definitions also need to be looked into. Like my colleague has stated, where we should also include boys who are also being defiled. But when you read the Bible, you find that there's no such thing. But yes, it is a fact, and these things are there. So I feel that castration is the best. You know, I was giving such a suggestion somewhere else. I was saying, you know, like these people who are protesting, because we saw 2 protests in the recent week. And they were saying, no, we need to castrate defilers and rapists. Yeah, and the people were saying, no, that is a human rights violation. But it's also a human rights violation if you are going to do such a thing to somebody, because that's a mark that you've left in their life for a very long time.
And trauma, plus trauma.
Exactly. So it's a good suggestion. Then they said, no, the human rights people are not going to allow such a thing, and they'll protest against it. So I'll give an example. When we look at America, which is a sovereign state, has still maintained the death penalty. There's no change there. But they are the same people that are coming from the West to come and lobby for us to
for human rights.
to do away with the death penalty.
And when you look at the states, like almost all the states have got this death penalty,
and it
still applies.
It still applies. When you go to, is it Lebanon? I think there's a certain country there where if you are trafficking heroin, it's death by hanging.
Wow.
It's a sovereign state. And that's the reason why so what can be law in Lebanon can't be law in Zambia if we decide. And what can be law in Zambia, it's up to us to come up with that thing and maintain it. So for me, I feel that since the law must act as a deterrent, if imprisonment is something that has failed to cause these people to behave themselves and control themselves, I think if you're going to come up with a permanent punishment, where if somebody offends, you cut, chemically castrate, they will stop misbehaving, so that the environment is going to be something that will be conducive and safe for our young girls and as well as women. It's really disappointing because it's a permanent thing when such a thing is done to somebody. Yes.
So, Mr. Lusekelo, when it comes to victims, like when it comes to implementation and social response to the victims and the survivors of rape, how do you think communities can be engaged to support survivors of rape and defilement?
Thank you for that question in terms of how communities can be engaged. So one thing that we must realize in terms of sensitization starts with all of us. And when it comes to sensitization and helping of victims, it is necessary that we cater to what each community or segment of Zambia society must meet. So we have in the urban areas, we have many privileges, including counseling centers. So it's wise that those who are training to be doctors, those who are training to be psychologists, put it in your profession that let's try to set up counseling centers. Also at institutional level, all right? And this also goes back to legal reform, all right? Under the Employment Code Act, for instance, you have a particular provision there which states, among other things, that each work facility is supposed to have a sexual harassment policy, right?
Exactly.
But there's no similar provision which relates to either schools, universities, health centers, etc. So there'd also be need to make necessary reform to require that, okay, at government level, whichever government institution we have, be it a school, be it a university, whatever, hospital, let there be a particular section that offers counseling for victims. Yeah. Let it not just be limited to a policy, right? Because policies, yeah, you can follow them. True. They are guides. Whether you follow them or not is another story. Exactly. But when it's written in stone in law, you're able to follow it. So that is on a government level, because many of the victims that we have are in government institutions. Exactly. Whether it be in government schools, government universities, they go to government hospitals, whatever government institutions. If we have it set in policy, in law, that let them have a particular thing that caters for victims, then well and good. And also there needs to be strengthening and government funding as it relates to the social welfare department. The Children's Code Act provided for the social welfare department with among other goals giving counseling to children. But sadly, according to the GBV report from 2022 by Parliament, these are highly underfunded. They lack staff. Yes. So even if the law is there, they don't have staff. So that is on the government side of things. But for us in the regular community, I think even in communities establishing health centers to cater for that. And then in rural areas, suburban areas, what is key is engaging places where community leaders, all right? Let's talk of chiefs. These are not really consulted as much. In the same way government has been engaging them to handle issues like child marriage. Let them also engage chiefs in terms of helping, in terms of mental health facilities. And also let us also, like, especially those of us who are doctors or whatnot, let us collaborate with these NGOs like World Vision. We say let's establish victim support for victims, right? In rural areas, right? Because the bulk of cases that happen are in rural areas. They're just not reported because there aren't facilities for them to report. So I feel that for community approach, if we are to take it that way, and then also be active in terms of advocating that the police, the government establish more facilities, police centers in rural areas, fast track courts in those areas as well, will be able to greatly help victims, because oftentimes people don't have a place to go to report this. So in order to help victims, we must know who the victims are. And the victims are only known once they report the perpetrators. But if there are no places to report the perpetrators, then this will continue. So if we're talking about effective community work, it starts from there. Advocacy, doing what we can here in the urban areas with mental assistance, then in the rural areas, working with chiefs, not only to establish more not only to establish more mental health facilities, but to establish police stations, fast track courts, and actually encourage people to report these matters so that they can be adequately addressed.
Exactly.
Yes, so that's what I would advise.
And when it comes to community, right? I feel really sad because just like I reiterated earlier, uh, the church is supposed to be the head, like the topmost, sensitizing with this issue. But you find that in the church, that's what the perpetrators are actually, the abusers are. And sometimes this child who is being abused, molested, whatever term I can use, sometimes they feel down and they don't have anywhere to run to. So I feel currently, I think the education system is the one which needs to work really hard and implement these into like the books. They need to learn about this area, maybe like as early as grade 3 or maybe 2. You agree, right, Mr. Simon?
Yes, and if you want to change a society, educate it.
Yes.
From the best, from its foundation. If you want to change the mindset, if you don't want people to be corrupt, if you don't want people to be, name it, you start from the education aspect.
I actually read a speech from Mr. John F. Kennedy once. Like he said it in 1960 something, somewhere. He said, like our progress as a nation can be no swifter than our progress in education.
Exactly.
Education is our only fundamental resource. So in a society which is educated, imagine the child is educated and they know they are right. Definitely they are going to report. But when they don't know they are right, they will continue being molested, and it's traumatic. It's like a child will grow up like I don't know, their self-esteem will be low. They'll be scared of men. This is when I now understand why some girls out there are like, men are dogs. What and what?
It becomes the something that stays in mind because of the particular actions of just one individual who was not thinking straight, or was mentally bankrupt.
And all men are now affected.
Exactly. And all men are now affected, which is something that must be taken seriously because, like we have mentioned earlier, this is something that is permanent in somebody's life.
Exactly.
And for it to go away, it only takes God for Christians. Yes.
Okay. So as we wrap up the show, this is a low focus radio show. If you're just joining us, and time check, it's 19:02, and we're wrapping up the show. So if you're just joining us, we're discussing on rape and defilement and legal reforms that can improve for there to be more justice. So maybe we can start with you, Mr. Simon. How do you think Zambia is faring with the global platform? Because I know we've got laws which we're discussing with Mr. Lusekelo and you that we need to improve maybe section 132 of the Penal Code. And how is Zambia faring like with our current laws, with the global world out there?
With the global world. Well,
Yes.
there have been some treaties that have been signed to try and protect the children and the women from all forms of these acts of sexual abuse. And it's something that must be honored because it's not a fight for us as a country. It's a global issue. And hence, we also have to ensure that we also take a quick survey and look at how other countries are handling such issues. And then we can also arrive at our own thing that can be better when we compare the two. Because when you look at the penalty for defilement and rape in other countries, you find that they can even fine you just for that, and it ends there.
That's very weak.
But when you look at our country, at least it is even prescribing imprisonment. But yet these things are still happening. Now, what more somewhere there where they are fining
someone.
If you have got money, you continue to commit the offense continuously. Yeah, so I think we need to come together and sit as a global village and ensure that we come up with uniform laws that will look into making the world a better place. When you go to the United Nations headquarters, you'll find where it's written that this was not established to bring heaven on earth,
True.
but to just make the earth a better place for mankind.
True. Yes. Very true. Coming to Mr. Lusekelo, let's discuss on the role of stakeholders. So, what do you think is some of the roles of stakeholders, such as the parliament and some associations, just like the association which you're coming from, which is the Lusaka Goldsmith Law Association, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've gotten it right now. LGU
Law. You can call
LGU
that.
Law. Actually, the short is more good.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. What are some of the roles of these stakeholders in trying to protect defilement and rape? Okay,
so I'll go through it level by level. So there is the role of parents. Your role as parents, to the parents that might be listening to us, is to safeguard your children, and not only safeguard your children, but to instruct them on how to protect themselves. Well, we live in a dangerous world.
Exactly.
A very dangerous world.
And it's necessary to tell, especially a girl or boy, that if your teacher touches you like this, tell us. if this man is saying, I'll give you a sweet, whatever, if you come here to my home, whatever, you don't do that. Those are the things that parents need to do.
But let me pause you right there. What, just like I reiterated earlier, sometimes the victims are the actual people, the
Perpetrators.
like the perpetrators are living
With
with
them in the same house.
Yes, in the same
Yes.
house.
So I'm moving from level to level.
Okay.
So then you have siblings, all right?
Mm.
In every home, you have the older sibling, one way or the other. Whether the older sibling if the older sibling is not a victim, but knows their younger brother or sister is the victim, they should step up and report the matter. You have relatives, uncles, some might be perpetrators, but there are also those who see what is happening and aware of what is happening. In such instances, you be willing to report. They are the mothers and fathers. You might not be the perpetrator, but your spouse or someone else close to you is a perpetrator. Go ahead and report, because there's more to life. In as much as, yes, he's a breadwinner or whatnot, the soul, the life of that person is greatly disturbed.
Exactly.
So then moving from there, that also applies to those that are neighbors. So from a more macro perspective, I've already issued in terms of my area statements about what we can do as a society, but I'll place special emphasis on church, given that majority of Zambians are Christians, but even those of other religious backgrounds can also take note of this. One thing that the Old Testament prophets were known for is speaking against the evils that took place in their nation. They spoke boldly and didn't care whether they would be hanged, whether they would be killed, whether they would be stoned, crucified, whatever. Whenever they saw injustice, whenever they saw that the kings were taking advantage of the poor, whenever they saw that there was grave injustice, they would be the ones in the forefront speaking. They didn't care, whether it was the priest that was doing, they would speak against the priest. One thing that Jesus was known for was speaking against the religious leaders of his time.
Yeah, the Pharisees and the scribes.
Exactly. So to the church especially, right? This is a season for you to rise up, all right? This is a season in which you come here and defend the most vulnerable, because God will hold you to account. God will hold you to account. You see these innocent victims, but rather than speaking for them, you stand there in the shadows and say, no, we want to safeguard our integrity. No, you are not safeguarding any integrity. God looks at you and says, no, you're dishonoring my name. So it's a call, especially in the religious community. Let's take this very seriously. A lot of these people, one way or another, if they don't go to church, they know someone who goes to church. All right?
Yeah.
They might be a member registered in your record, even if they don't come. These are people that you know. You speak out and participate with police officers. Make sure these people are arrested. They go to jail. Offer support for the victims. And this is now a call to the rest of the community and everyone else listening. Don't sit in the background. Do something. Do what you can manage. Sensitization on your socials, do so. Reporting, do so. Working with you police officers, do so. Knowing counselors or what, help. Do something if we are to create a better Zambia.
Exactly. So if you're just joining us, we are almost wrapping up the show. Tonight we are discussing, we are redefining the law on defilement and rape. So the laws which can improve, and the legal reforms that can be put up to improve. So we've almost come to the end of the show, and I'm joined in the studio by two guests, Mr. Lusekelo Kamfwa and Mr. Simon Mwewa. And to you, Mr. Simon, what are your closing remarks to whoever is listening right now and to the whole community about this pressing issue which is currently happening?
Okay, so Martin Luther King once said, injustice, is injustice to all. So what can affect somebody directly must affect you indirectly, because we are one global village and we are the world altogether. So to the lawmakers, I think there has been a clarion call out there which has continued to be overemphasized, which is that they should come up with reforms to the law that will be there to ensure that these people are brought to book, because they are telling us that imprisonment is not enough. So the responsibilities of those that are going to parliament is to ensure that they make laws that are going to make the world a better place. As it was stated earlier, this law has to be a tool for social change. And what is that social change? Social change, it has to also be a tool that brings about public order, that is there to deter even those people that would be offenders. So I think my appeal to the National Assembly of Zambia is that they should take into consideration the petitions that were submitted to our Honor the Vice President and the Minister of Justice, and they should begin to table it and come up with a procedure and a roadmap on which these things are going to be relooked at. And to all those that are listening, at the end of the day, all of us are standing for one thing, and it's justice. And we must ensure that, because if you are going to say, no, 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 it's none of my business and it's not my plan, it's not anything to do with me, or it's not my plan to help anybody because it doesn't affect me. There are some who have girl children, unfortunately. And the funny thing about life is that if you're going to laugh at your friend who is in a particular situation and you don't want to help them, then it will be on you tomorrow. And that is
Karma.
when you realize how these things are feeling. So let us protect the girl child. Let us protect the women out there. Let us make the world a better place by playing our roles. If we are NGOs, let's come in and play our particular role. If we are parliamentarians, we must begin to accept bringing about reforms that are going to ensure that justice is attained at the end of the day. You know, just as I'm winding up, I remember seeing this man who was where the Minister of Community Development went to Chadley House, somewhere there, and when she went there was an orphanage which was being run by a pastor, a pastor who is supposed to be a shepherd and a guide, and there was some accusation that the man was actually abusing the people that were orphans there. And when it was reported, the woman was siding with the pastor and saying, no, actually, this is ABCD and the like, which is very disappointing. So to those people, there are people out there who are vulnerable to the extent where they actually have no other way in life if you were to leave the places where they're at. So we need to think about all these people. We need to play our roles, like I've said. If you're an NGO, please take part in your respective role. If you're a parliamentarian, you must make laws that are going to be for the better of society. If you are a church leader, as my colleague Lusekelo Kamfwa has spoken, you must rebuke, correct. And yes, the process of rebuking, the unfortunate part is that the law will come in and say, okay, your sins are forgiven, but you must punish you. That's how it is. So the message I'm leaving with the people here is that please, let's work together as a nation to ensure that we help this nation escape this gassing, as I'm calling it, which we are facing currently. That's the remarks I'm leaving the people with this evening.
All right. For me, I'm calling it Western gassing, actually. And I would like to reiterate the point which you made on the church. I feel the church is supposed to be the safest place because that's where God is.
Exactly.
But if the church is not safe, then where are these victims going to run to?
It's actually
Because-
for devils.
Let it not be like that. Let the church be a safe place. Let the homes be a safe place, because the victims, actually, the most victims are coming from these homes and these churches. And sometimes they'll say, no, don't go and report because you bring shame on the church. No, don't go and report because you bring shame upon your father. He's our breadwinner, he's our provider. And if you report this, he's going to jail, and who is going to provide for us? We're going back on the street. That's the sad truth. And to you, Mr. Lusekelo, what are your closing remarks?
Well, to use a certain acronym, KISS, which is to kiss it, which is keep it short and simple. So I'm keeping it short and simple by simply stating, riding on the protocols observed, whether there were protocols or not. Anyway, in a more serious and somber manner, let us continue this fight. We're in a tough time as a nation, but one thing that we should take hope in is it is possible and very much achievable to actually reduce the number of cases that are happening in terms of rape and defilement.
Sure.
But it takes every one of us working, not only those who are parliamentarians, not only those who defend us, but even those of us who are just regular people just on the street. Do what you can manage to fight this scourge. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Lusekelo and Mr. Simon, for showing up on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope next time to come and table the issues of constitutional
Definitely.
students' perspective.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, and if you're just joining us, this is the Law Focus Radio Show, and unfortunately, we've come to the end of our show. Tonight, we're discussing on the issue of rape and legal reforms that can improve. It's been a pressing issue, and it's just like Mr. Simon. Mr. Simon, what are you calling it again?
It's a gassing. It's an
It's a
incident
gassing.
which has affected the whole country. And in South Africa, unfortunately, there was also massive protest.
Yes,
I
massive-
don't know what's happening to men these days, why they can't control themselves.
I think it's one of those prefaces for the end of time. There'll be signs. These are the signs.
Now there are Christians who are the culprits.
Yes, and thank you very much for joining us, all listeners. I have been your host, Emmanuel Mwangala. Join us next week. The time of the show is 18 to 19 hours, and unfortunately, we've even gone overboard because the discussion was so nice. Yes, and don't